Hi everyone, good afternoon. Hello, do you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi Prasanna, you're not very sound is not that clear.
Is it? Let me log in back. Just give me a second. Hi, does it sound any better?
So those
Or
are
is it the same?
please stand now.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Is it the same? Himalaya, is my voice clear?
It's clear for me, Prasanna. I don't know for
me,
people
sir.
who joined from Sri
Yes.
Lanka.
It's clear, Mr. Prasanna.
All right, okay. Thanks. Thank you. I think I have issue with this. Okay, we have 8 people in the call. See, really sorry about had to cancel the class last minute last week. Wasn't feeling well last week, so sorry about it. Had to inform it last minute because morning here is like noon there. All right, so without spending too much of time, let's see. Let's try to recall where we have stopped and try to see whether we have how much we have forgotten for the 2 weeks. Himali, can you enable the pause function on this while we are just trying to talk about this one? So I hope that you are studying and at least going through what we have learned in the class. For that, Himali, can you enable the pause function?
Yes, sir.
Can you put that pause function? The people
Okay.
who worked on that one is
Okay, sir.
can't see it there. Just quickly, without spending much of time, I know that we discussed the other questions here. Okay, just put the until that comes up. Just put the answers on your chat, please, on these questions. Let's just recall and start our brains to work. Okay, fine. The answer is C, correct. And under the SOX Act. All right, this one, easy question. Yeah, okay. C is the answer, correct. Uh, this will be asked throughout your course. Like this is a this is a very famous or loved topic by CISI, self-regulation. This will come in different areas of your lessons. What should be the answer on this one?
So can you see the poll option?
Um, yeah, I can see.
Please answer quickly.
Okay, you can answer on the poll option. Thanks, everyone. We have 10 people. Can others also select the answers? If you have any problem in accessing this, let me know. Why am I always getting only about half of the class is responding to this? It takes a lot of time if you don't respond fast. Anyone who can't see the poll option, please let me know. All right. So I want to take more time on this because I want you to do something. Right. So these are the results of what you have given. And I don't want to give the answer for this. I want you to go back to your textbook and find the place where it says about it, because I have seen the confusion of this many times now through the questions that I have been asking on self-regulated model, and this is they're very, very serious about this part. Can you find in your textbook, where does it says? And what is the correct answer on this one? Because it clearly gives the answer on. Yeah, whoever finds it first, please let me know.
Shall I read it out, Prasanna? Is that okay?
Yeah, tell me where it is. Yes, yes, good.
Yeah, in the financial sector, self-regulation is typically a unique combination of private interests with government oversight,
Mm,
which has
right.
delivered an effective.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Randuli. Uh, Randilu. So this answer is selected only by one person. So actually answer is B, because I mean I don't say that the other answers does not have meaning to what it says, but is actually the meaning given by them means combination of industry rules with government oversight. So these words actually play a major role in it, because it doesn't mean that industry regulates itself, but the government decides appropriate qualifications for the participants. Now that's not the self-regulatory model that they are asking for. Yes, the government, the players in the market will be always selected by the regulator, but the requirement of self-regulatory model is this. Okay, so without applying the general knowledge and general understanding, we need to stick to the text that is given, unfortunately or fortunately, when you're giving the answers. So that's why I'm asking you to be familiar with it, and always refer that when you're giving answers to the questions. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for us to get through the exam. So examination model is that, unfortunately. Um, I asked this question earlier, but I just want to retest it in a minute. Oh, shoot. This exact question we looked at last week, but I won't retest it because I want to emphasize on this. Can others answer fast, please, on this one? So far, the answers are correct, but I'm only having 4 answers. Other 5 people, please. I'm awaiting another 5 people to answer. Are you there in the class in the first place? All right. See, we have only 5 people responding to it. I can't help about it. Yeah, your answer is right. So the rules must always provide reliable distinction between right and wrong. We are telling it in relation to the regulator. It puts pressure on regulator rule-based approach, because they need to define what the rule is. That's a simple question. Try this one. Yeah, correct. So answer is C. The preserve financial integrity is what is required by all these self-regulated and rule-based or anything. The mainly what the regulator is looking at is to preserve financial integrity in the market. As we told at the beginning, very beginning, the trust on the financial market is essential for that to continue, and that is what regulator is looking at, because it's very dangerous. The people will lose um, the trust on the financial system. So that's why they are looking at preserving the financial interest of preserving the integrity of the financial system. Okay, so can someone remind me where we stopped last time? We discussed about SOX. Can you remember where we stopped last time? Discuss for interrupt that. FATCA. Yeah, we discussed FATCA, right? And we were here. Or have we discussed this as well? Yes, no, can't remember. We discussed about FATCA, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir, we discussed about factor.
Okay. So FATCA, main things that you need to know is that it's a long arm regulation, which is extraterritorially impacting the US, um, the US citizens, who US taxpayers or US residents who will be living anywhere in the world. We discuss anti-money laundering detectives, have we? I think so. So money laundering is basically that is nothing strange to you, because you all are dealing with these rules and regulations every day, and it's being discussed widely in the market. And the anti-money laundering detectives in EU is basically Risk-Based Act combined with the national plus international risk assessments. So this this removes the anonymity, like beneficial ownership and the virtual currencies were introduced into this the anti-money laundering. The beneficial ownership, you know, that who's going to be the actual beneficial owner of the funds, or the ownership of the activity or the asset. And virtual currencies are getting popular at the moment. So how well that is being governed, because it should not be room for anyone to do the money laundering. So that's not that's the intention of the regulators, to have more enhanced transparency on virtual currencies, which is difficult, but by introducing them into the legal system, into the regulatory system, that they need to improve the visibility of that, because bitcoins or any other virtual currencies that are coming up should not be used as money laundering activities, because that's going to be the future. And the fintech firms are coming up with their currencies, so that's going to be the future to reduce the cost, because most of the fintech firms are now thinning the margins because their expenditures are less, or their overheads are less. So virtual currencies are inevitable, and then has to bring back into the governing system. Uh, Common reporting standards, which is actually for automatic exchange of information. Why it is automatic is the there's if you try to do manually, that's not going to work in today's world because it's so complex. So automatic sharing of residents, assets, and income is one part of that is introduced by FATCA, but it's being used by other agreed government institutes or the regulators to combat the tax evasion, because people can use different jurisdictions, different countries, to make sure that they are not tax citizens of those countries, and that's been happening legally and illegally both. Um, it's a very thin margin, a thin differentiation between whether that is legal or illegal, because you know that tax havens are being used by some of the businesses, and which is legal, it's not illegal. So the regulators will sometimes introduce new regulations or to combat that kind of offshoring into different tax havens and having their business activities in a different place where it is less taxed and you will not get caught into the higher tax regimes. But that's again a challenge on the regulators. OECD competent authority agreement between inland revenues is trying to do this automatic sharing of resident assets and incomes, and common reporting standards are also being introduced. So these are introduced as combating to the challenges that are faced by the regulators and inland revenues on the taxation. Not 100%, but working some up to some extent, and they're trying to, because when it comes to sharing of information, it's always not possible between the different uh, jurisdictions. So there should be governmental agreements, we call contracts between governments. The name that is used to contracts between governments is treaties. Um, it is an agreement. There's nothing different to what we have known about the contracts. So we don't call the contracts when the two countries um, agree to certain terms as a contract. We call it a treaty. So if you see the word treaty, that is nothing big. It's just a contract, but done only between the countries. So that's called treaty. That is in place for certain countries. It already has about 51 members, and it can extend. It always being agreed with different countries looking at the benefit. Some countries are not uh, uh, taking up that kind of challenges at the first place, but eventually they will have to, otherwise that's of no purpose, because if 51 or 60 or 70 countries are sharing information, rest of the hundreds of countries are not, then it's inevitable that someone will go and mess around with their profits in those countries who are not sharing information. It's always a possibility. But what we need to understand in the regulations or the regulatory environment at the moment in the international community is you can't be 100%. And this is for everything, because the treaties and the international agreement or international law is not 100%, because some of the countries are not agreeing to some of the things, and it's entirely up to that country. And however much other countries says that this is beneficial, sometimes it might not. Other apart from the financial treaties, even if the carbon neutralization or environmental policies or any other treaties that are signed, sometimes countries withdraw from it. US withdrew from one of the treaties like that. So the countries can withdraw because it's that country's own right. It's like we get into an agreement in an organization that is, let's say that organization is international community, and countries can always withdraw, or countries can always go and join if they are following those rules and regulations, or they are agreeing to do that. Having said that, even if they agree to them, the level of them complying with it will always change in the practical world. So that's a practical world. uh, some may 100% agree on it, some may 100% may implement it. Some may have their filtrations. They might not share all the information. They will only filter, and certain informations will be made available. And therefore, just because these policies or the procedures or organizations have established certain treaties does not mean everything is 100%. So that's why we need to learn about it. And that's why always the financial sector has to be alert about unexpected things. So that's why so-called that international banks have been subject to sometimes heavy penalties, because even though they have a lot of systems and the regulations, there are some countries who are not following them. And unfortunately, when it comes to international banks, international financial organizations, they be caught somewhere. But local organizations is less likely to be caught, and which makes this room for malpractices or some loopholes for this system. And that's practical world, and that will exist uh, until everyone gets into this common platform and objectively looking at them. So that's just about how international law works and international community works. So it applies similarly when we discuss. Just keep it in mind. However much we tell about these things, that always there's a um, uh, room for variation in using those rules and regulations in individual countries, because no one is there to rule the countries. So the governments or their central banks or their regulators, because that's entirely up to their country. Um, so as we discussed, this sharing is going to be implemented world across in time to come. FATCA is also narrower in scope than OECD, because it's about the financial assets, but it is one of the concepts that is being used. FATCA being US, as I told you earlier, have higher power of negotiating with countries so that they have implemented. If Sri Lanka try to do that, it'll be very difficult for us to go and in, because importance placed on us will be less. So that's a practical word, even though we talk about like we all need to get in to sharing of information kind of things. And the other type of the institutes, or how or what sort of mm, environments that we are operating in the investment, we can categorize them as exchange, multilateral trading facilities, and systemic internalizers. So these three type of ones are different, but they all help a financial sector to grow and generate more capital in it. But the level of regulations or level of it being regulated is different from exchange to multilateral trading houses to systemic internalizers. When it comes to exchange, as we all know, these are exchange houses which are being highly scrutinized by the regulators. And it's always like, if you take Singapore Exchange, or New York Stock Exchange, or London Stock Exchange, they are highly regulated places, and members of them, or you can't just be listing your shares there without being following all the rules and regulations which are given by them. So it's been more regulated, and all transactions are very transparent, and everyone knows what's happening there. It's being as used as indicators. Uh, so that's highly regulated, less worrying for the regulators, because they can see everything. They can have the reports, and they know that very less room for anything to go wrong. And the moment that one of the members or one of the listed companies are going wrong, uh, it's easy for them to address because as reporting standards, checking, everything happens in that kind of exchange houses. Um, so the FCA is look to establish whether the applicant is fit for the purpose. So when someone is coming in to those markets, whether it has sufficient financial resources to properly carry out its activities when it comes to exchanges, and that the applicant is willing to. So these are entry barriers. So you can't even enter in these places without having this scrutiny. And the applicant is willing and to able to share information with the FCA. This is very important because otherwise you would not know what's happening. And to promote and maintain high standards of integrity and fair dealing, including laying down rules for activities on exchange. Uh, and also the applicant will record, monitor, enforce compliance. Record, monitor, and enforce compliance with the rules of exchange. So pretty much governed. Uh, if you get Singapore Exchange, it's responsible for, these are typical responsibilities of all the exchanges, regulating and the stock market, approving applications for listing, because you can't just go and list as and when you want. There is a procedure that you need to qualify for that. Provision and administration of business listing rules. They are giving the rules of the businesses, what you need to have in listing, and there's supervision and market surveillance and risk management is also in place, and the capital requirement, overseeing the capital requirement of brokers. And because not only the companies who are getting listed, and if because brokers are generally doing it on credit, so that they need to make sure that they have the financial capabilities and stability, because otherwise there will be a fall in the market. So these are also being investigated. Uh, so it's being supervised and uh, properly monitored. So let's worry about that. And when it comes to anything which goes beyond it, or if they break the rule or breach the agreements with the regulators, penalizing is also in place. So if anyone breaks the rules, it will be uh, acted with a reprimand, fine, suspension of the membership, or uh, exculpation of members, or trading representatives, so that you're highly regulated. Anything happens, there is a mechanism of punishing you also. So basically, it's foolproof system mostly. And in comparison to exchanges, multilateral trading facilities and systems and internalizers are of that monitoring levels. These are multilateral trading facilities are systems that brings together multiple parties. That's why it's in multilateral trading houses and retail investors or other investment firms, which are away from the exchanges, which we don't see in Sri Lanka, but these developed markets will have that multilateral trading facilities. Allow parties, excuse me, trade among themselves away from the exchanges. This is not the exchange that we talked about like earlier in my New York Exchange or London Stock Exchange. So these are outside of that, which are primarily small in terms of scale. This allows great competition and for investors to exchange their the the, the instruments, and this invites of the monitoring at the level that is be monitored at the exchange houses. So when it comes to outside the exchange tradings, the regulators are much worried now because they have the capability of exchanging this, they have the capability of raising finances, and the instruments are being dealt with the public or the retail investors as well as the corporate investors. And this, since that these are also a larger portion of investment which are going in, benefits as well as the risks. Both are there. Benefit is any company or any corporate who's not matching the regulator standards, because we discussed that you can't go to exchange and list it without matching the requirement of the regulator, sorry, the exchange, right? So there are entry barriers are there, but this will reduce the entry barriers so that businesses can raise more finance through these and exchange even get a higher rate, and also get a competition between the investors. But when it comes to the risk case, they are not regulated as much as it was done in exchange houses. So these are basically of the regulators eyes. But the regulations are being brought in to at least to capture what's happening in there. So the key benefits of regulated market structure, that the things that I told you, and as well as the things that I don't told you is in your textbook. Please refer that. So this part of the multi-lateral trading facility and system internalizers do not need that minimum requirement entry requirements which are defined by the exchanger houses, but still uh, the regulators have organized in such a way to capture them into the system so that they have some kind of monitoring, so that financial system will not collapse by the activities of the multi-lateral trading facilities or systemic internalizers, basically exchange houses and other places where the capital is getting exchanged. So these are the two uh, uh, separations, like exchange fully governed, multi-lateral defense internet systemic internalizers are not as much as governed by them. So therefore there is little risk in that, but regulators are working on reducing that risk. And organized trading facilities, OTFs. So this is introduced by MiFID to multilateral trading system that is not regulated, not a regulated market or an multilateral trading facility. So multilateral trading facilities are also being looked at by the regulators, but these are uh, even in addition to that. But MiFID rules have introduced organized trading facilities to give more visibility to the regulators and the public. So in these, you can't deal the equities. Equities are not being traded in these facilities. So other than that, you can deal the other ones, the bonds, structures, finance products, emission allowances, and other derivatives can be dealt, but not the shares. So the difference between multi-lateral trading facilities and OTFs is that they cannot deal the equities, but other than that, other things can be dealt. Um, since that MiFID rules has to be followed on this one. So earlier, when you just issue bonds by a company, you were just issuing as a private institute. But now, since that organized trading facilities are facilitating these things, you have much higher level of monitoring or the transparency under this organized trading facilities when those being used. And there is a restriction between this OTFs or the organized trade facilities and systemic internalizers cannot be done by single firm. So mostly these are handled by two different firms. Mostly organized trading facilities are handled by organized trading facilities cannot be systemic internalizers. So it has to be two different levels, because you can't deal with equities when it comes to MiFID rules on organized trade facilities, OTFs. With that, we are going into the off-market transactions. So off-the-market transactions we call over-the-counter transactions. Uh, Derivatives like commercial papers. So transaction conducted off-market, this is not regulated. and it's privately negotiated. So the people who are going to invest in that knows the risk or have to know the risk. If not, then they will be facing with the consequences of those risks. So that's why over-the-counter transactions are not in the governing networks. The financial crisis brought the OTC derivatives to regulators' attention, like always. Lehman Brothers, AIG, and also when it comes to Sri Lanka, you have seen some of the financial firms collapsing, and the people who have invested without knowing the risk have lost their money. And this is a risk in the market, because over-the-counter investments might um, always give you a higher return because they are not under any of these governed exchanges, and obviously high risk. People without knowing the high risk, just looking at the high return, can lose their money. Then they're expected to know about their risk, but general public, as you know, that they don't know about the risk.
So sorry
Um,
to interrupt you.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
When you say over-the-counter derivatives, so in any financial institution, I don't know, my understanding could be wrong, but it doesn't happen kind of a over-the-counter because we don't deal with an unknown kind of a customer, right? You get this whatever, all those documentation completed
You're
before
right.
you get into a deal with the customer. So
You're right. So this is not about financial institutes. The governed financial institute that we are talking about, these are like the finance companies that you see. If I'm taking some of the examples, like the finance companies that you see in the market, which are not under the supervision of central bank.
okay.
So who are just issuing like taking deposit, they are telling it deposits, but these are not deposits. They're like commercial papers that they are selling. So that any firm can sell it, and like investors, you can go and invest in those firms, and it's very difficult for a regulator always to go. This is not these are not financial institutes under the regulator's governance. This is about the capital market we are discussing about. So investment products that the some of the firms can offer, and people go and take it on over the counter. It might not sometimes be the financial institutes, or even now I think even these what do you call small financial firms are also coming under some kind of supervision. But like, let's say a private company, I want to issue the commercial papers. I can issue commercial papers, right? I don't have to go to exchange house. If I'm a private firm, I'm telling, okay, I'm selling these papers at 100 rupees a portion, or 1,000, and I'll give you a 20% return. So that's a commercial paper, and you are taking on only on the credibility of the company, and therefore there's no uh, transparency to the financial regulators. There's no need of me going and listing it in the regulators exchange, because it's off the counter, over the counter that I'm giving it. And people are also investing in me, believing in me, assumedly believing in me. And sometimes, since that is not regulated, anything can happen. A fraudster can issue it, and if people go and, like what Sakriti has done, so taken money, and people believed in him, and he ran out with the money, and nothing was given to the people because it's not in regulated market. Regulator doesn't know what's happening. Suddenly some fellow has taken money from people, and people have gone and invested in that person, believe in that person, which you can't stop. So the exact issues that we are seeing there is transparency, because this over-the-counter deals are not coming into the regulator, and regulator can't be looking at everyone who's just trying to get some investment. And regulator, on the other hand, regulator don't have to stop it as well, because if you go and invest somewhere, you need to know what the risk is, and you can clearly see what are the regulated institutes and what are not non-regulated institutes. So issue is when it comes to privately done, it's not public sometimes. So it's transparency issues. You don't know what's happening. Regulators don't know what's happening, and there's no need of regulator knowing as well. I can go and invest in your company, right? Or your business, or you say that, "Okay, I'm issuing this paper. I'll give it in 5 years time. I'll give you 100% return. So I'm giving money. So it's privately done. You can't capture it, and you don't have to either. There's always transparency issues and counterparty risk. There's always credit risk because it's just like I'm giving a credit, and there's no collateral. In the good example of Sakwiti's case, there was no collateral given. They just issued papers. You're going and depositing. He's just giving you interest. It's your trust on him. When you lose the trust, can't help. And but high degree of flexibility to the issuer. They don't have to show anything. They don't have to do anything. If there are people who are willing to invest in you, they take it. Similarly, you might have seen this pyramid organizations are also doing the same. They're asking you to invest, and people being greedy about the rate that they're offering, go and invest. These are over-the-counter ones. It's like you go and buy something from the supermarket. You don't have to be regulated. You have to check the product and buy it. And same, if you apply the same concept, if people go and buy it, government doesn't have any uh, objection. But these, if they are growing more than the financial sector, then the government has to worry about, because then the financial sector can collapse because people will lose money. And then the trust on the financial system is always about integrity, because people don't understand the difference between the financial integrity on the over-the-counter products or the banks or the financial institutes sometimes, because these sometimes can be as big as which are impacting the country's economy, like Promuka Bank, but that's a regulated institute. There, nothing to do with over-the-counter ones, but the collapse of one firm can result in major mistrust, or the loss of trust in the integrity of the market. Even the Sakwiti made a huge impact on the market because of what he has done. So these are the risk of them. So that we discuss about the financial market. The main thing. Um, so mainly what we need to understand is the difference between exchange, multi-region trading facility, which has system intelligence, which has some level of monitoring, or some can be monitored by the exchange. But these off the market ones, no one knows what's happening, and that's that adds a risk to the financial market if portion of people who are going to invest in more. But can we tell that off the market transaction has to be stopped? No, because that can be a method of raising finance for legitimate business, or someone who's actually wanting funds, who does not have any collateral, or who does not have any recognition by the people, like general public. But privately they can issue over the counter um, derivatives, and genuinely if they do the business and give the returns, there's no issue. But that's based on the trust. Regulators can't govern all these things, like your small businesses. They don't have resources to do that. So that's why it's being allowed. But regulators will always look at it to be not impacting the market. The moment that it starts impacting market, the governments will get involved. That's how it normally happens. All right, so we are going into the second part of this. Okay, so the next part of this is about the international approach to regulations. So international approach to regulations, we are going to discuss about the jurisdiction of different regulators. At the beginning also, can you remember that I told you like some of the regulations that we are talking about in relation to the European Union and uh, oh, okay, great. You had a mini quiz. Yeah. So jurisdiction, I told you that some of the regulations are for European Union, some of the ones are for US, some of the ones are for UK. So um, for the benefit of people who might have some confusion about what jurisdiction is, the jurisdiction is a power to hear a case by a court. So when we call a legal system like a country, if you take jurisdiction of Sri Lankan courts are only within Sri Lanka. So you can't take a matter in India in Sri Lankan courts. Similarly, India has jurisdiction on their own court system within India, the matters which are related to India. So the jurisdiction of that will be only India. And when it comes to different regulations, how do you implement regulations? Why we call regulations is we discussed earlier also, there's a rule, and if you breach the rule, there's a repercussion. And that's how you manage the rule. That's how you manage the firms, that's how you manage the people. You have a law. When you breach the law, there's a repercussion. Otherwise, you can't implement law. Enforce law, we call it enforcement. So to enforce these regulations, you need to have some kind of jurisdiction defined, because anything which is happening in the law which is impacting people in Sri Lanka and actions that are done by Sri Lankan people does not mean that someone in India or someone in US has done the same action, which can you can take an action inside Sri Lankan court system. You can't, unless there's, I told earlier, the word is treaty, the agreement between the governments or the contracts between the government. If there's nothing like that, it's very difficult for you to implement, or you can't, because there's no jurisdiction. If you take the matter to the courts will say we don't have jurisdiction. You might have heard of this, some of you might not. So for the benefit of people who are not, that I define what jurisdiction is. If you're not clear, just type it on the YouTube. They will explain better than me. So jurisdiction of different regulations matters because we need to understand where it is being implemented and who can take actions, or where it is enforceable. Uh, recognize investment exchanges that you have. Membership of them is often international. Why we call recognition of investment exchanges? So when you have investment exchanges like New York Exchange or London Stock Exchange, they are, yes, they are London, they are New York, but they are often is a member of a multi country or multi-regional membership of certain regulations, so that anyone who's investing in them knows that it's not only a matter or not only agreed by UK, it will be agreed by all other countries or major countries whom that the institute is being a member of. So there are other self-regulated organizations, and self-regulated organizations generally the nature is national, but doesn't mean that cannot be international. It can be international, but essentially that's national because they are working as the definition that we discussed earlier, working under the supervision of under the regulators overview. So that's generally national. So government appointed um, national regulatory bodies like central bank or any other tax authorities or anything like that generally focus in national. So national focus, their jurisdiction is national. Central bank, if you take Central Bank of Sri Lanka, can regulate it only within the banking activities inside Sri Lanka, financial activities within Sri Lanka. They can't do anything with Maldives, they can't do anything there, but they have a coordinated approach. Increasingly, that's being uh, getting activated now. So coordinated with other financial institutes or other countries. And international regulatory authorities and national authorities with the international reach. So they are working cross-border, sometimes or most of the time international, and international regulatory organizations. So they are being international standard setting bodies. They give a standard. If your country's authorities are willing to follow that, or if your country is willing to follow that, you agree on them. And once you agree on them, as long as you are being a member or as long as you want to be the governed by that rules, you will have membership of that. So which indicates that you're following the rules of them, and any action that institute is taking, like disciplinary action or regulatory action taken by those institutes, will be implemented. So basically that's the environment what we are talking about, the jurisdiction of these regulations. So regulatory bodies and the people who are making international standards, or the regulatory bodies, or the international regulatory bodies, will have control over taking actions as long as you are a member of it. If you are not following the rules and if you are not agreeing to what they are saying, what they will do is they will expel you out from it and say that, okay, this particular institute or this country is not a member of ours, so they will not follow our rules, or they are not following our rules, so we are not keeping them as a member anymore. So that will be the response from those institutes. So that's how they are keeping the rule active and being followed by everyone. So international regulatory organizations and standard setting it is about understand the role of international regulatory organizations like Bank for International Settlements, yes, Financial Stability Board. So these are the ones that we have to know about. The International Organization for Securities and Commission. So these are the three types that we are going to talk about here. And European region. So European regulatory bodies, the European system of financial supervision, European supervisory authorities, and European Systemic Risk Board. So these are all regulated on European region, and US Securities and Exchange Commission. So you can see the jurisdiction if you take about under this, the International Bank of International Settlements, or these three. If you look at it's the jurisdiction is mostly, or the empowerment of their rules is mostly worldwide. Whoever who's the members of them, or whoever wants to follow it, whoever says that we want to be a member, so we are following your membership. And the second one, European regulatory bodies, that it's only European Economic Region. They call European Economic Region, so that's applicable for them. And US Security and Exchange Commission applies only to US. So these are the differentiation of the jurisdictions. You need to know that because US Security and Exchange Commission rules are not applicable for Sri Lanka or India. It's only applicable US. When it comes to European regulatory bodies will France, German, or any other country which is in European Economic Region will have to follow them. And international ones, as long as you're being member, you can follow them. I'll just go through this, but I know that you know about these things more, so that just read about it more. Bank of International Settlement, we generally call, I'm just going through the keywords because they'll be important. I'm just highlighting the keywords because that's important in your questions. So central bank for central banks is generally word that CISI is using for this introduction of this BIS. So it look after international monetary and financial cooperation, and the central banks are the customers, and also some international organizations. This is not a bank who accept deposits or provide financial services to private individuals or corporates because they are the bankers of central banks. That's what you need to understand. So BIS guidelines do not automatically apply to you, as I told you earlier, because when it comes to international community, there's no uh, leader for international community, or the countries are not under anyone. Countries are individual. So therefore, International Bank of International Settlement also can't say that all central banks follow me, or if you don't follow, I'm going to take action. You can't. It's voluntarily the central banks or the governments have to tell that we will be a member of you. And the ratification required by the country, another legal word, ratification. So ratification is where you will confirm that you will be a part of this. So I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So you ratify in the sense that there's the international law or international regulation. If your country wants to follow that rule, you pick that rule and incorporate it in your legal system and say that we are now following this rule. There are some complications or complicated things on how international law applies nationally. I'm not taking you there. So for the moment, just remember, as UK, you might get a different view if you are studying for any other US courses. US stance on this is different. So I'm telling you, by any chance, if someone says something different, don't get distracted. Monism and dualism is two different approaches where the international law is being applied in a country. We, Sri Lanka, UK, are on the same in applying international law. Just because international law is there, we are not subject to it. We need to get it and incorporate in our legal system for that to be a law in the country, for us to follow it. Okay. So a simple example is, do you know about Sepa Lekanayaka? Who's Sepa Lekanayaka? You know about it?
Person who
You know
hijacked
who Sepa
an
Lekanayaka is?
aeroplane, is it?
Yeah, person who hijacked an aeroplane. Just to explain this, how international law has to be, why international has to be ratified. Sepa Lekanayaka hijacked a plane, and he was being taken into custody, like anyone who has taken a plane will ultimately get into custody. So he was taken into custody, and Sri Lankan government asked, okay, send him, we will punish him. Yes, so Sri Lankan, send him out to us. And then I think the France authorities has handed over him to Sri Lankan authorities. And now Sri Lankan police went and took him into custody from the airport and taken him. And now next day they are producing the courts to punish him. Now, when you take the matter to courts, you need to tell under which law that you're going to be punishing him, right? So internationally, we all know hijacking a plane is a criminal offense. You need to fine it. You need to punish him. But for police to take this matter to courts, they need to find the law which says hijacking a plane is a criminal offense. In Sri Lankan law books or the law, it wasn't there because we never thought that Sri Lankan will hijack a plane. So our parliament has never put up a law to say that hijacking a plane is an offense. So say Pala's lawyer said, there's no law. Hijacking a plane is not a criminal offense in Sri Lanka, so you can't punish my client. There you go. So but at the moment, there is a law, international law, which says hijacking planes is a criminal offense. But Sri Lanka, since that we have not ratified that law in our country, we don't have a law to take it to the courts. So that's at that time what the parliament had to do was to ratify that and punish him. But there was a narrow escape by the parliament, because you generally can't introduce a criminal law applicable to the past. So this is Sepa Laikanaka, once he has committed the crime of hijacking a plane. Now Parliament is saying, okay, he has done it last month. We are now implementing this law. Is not generally acceptable. You can't put up a law like that. But luckily, since that we have a provision in our constitution say that if we are part of an international community, if international law is there, when we are ratifying it, we can apply it to the past. So that's how he was being punished for a number of years for taking that. But if until that international law is brought into the country and ratified as a law of the country, you can't implement it inside the country. So that's why we say BIS does not automatically apply just because Bank of International Settlements is there. It doesn't automatically apply. We as a country has to ratify that. So that's our willingness. We can say no, we can say yes. So when we say yes, you can be a member of it and governed by the rules of the Bank of International Settlement. So that's why ratification is important. Because some countries, if they are not ratifying that, will not be a member of the International Bank of Settlements, or they can't implement the rules that are governed by the international organizations or international law. To reduce the confusion, America or US is taking a totally different stance. They don't need ratification of international laws, but that's their country's view. Any international law in the world can generally apply in US courts without ratification. We call it a different word. That's a monism. That is, we call international law is taken as same as the country's law by US, but not like Sri Lanka and UK, which you are studying for CISI is UK. So ratification, or you willingly go and you need to do an action to be a part of these international laws. So ratification is required on this one. We went a little over on this one. So I hope that I clarified the requirement of ratification here and why it is not automatically applying. So it's not automatically applying here. But if you study anything about US, yes, US will say that it's automatically applying. Forget about US. You need to ratify. Okay. So the International Banking Federation is incorporated in 2004 to facilitate this effort. And if your country or your regulator, your country is willing to be a part of this, you can be a part of this. So you become a customer of the Bank of International Settlements, which is BIS. The International Banking Federation, so it's banking association of all these countries, which most of the banks in the world are member of. So it's a global reach, and then that's the central banks of these countries will make sure that this is run according to the BIS. So it's a central bank for the central banks, and not for any retail customers to deal with them. So this is where you get the settlements from international transactions. So that's why you can do most of the transactions internationally with the other banks with the trust, because you are a member of this, and this is acting as central bank. So like banks are dealing with each of the other bank because they know that both of the banks are member of central bank. Similarly, when countries can deal with other countries' banks because you are a member of Bank of International Settlement, so that you know that you will get your settlement from the other bank. Basel regulations and Basel Committee, this is being known by everyone. So I'm not going to go into much of the details on that, but the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision uh, enhance financial stability is the objective by improving supervisory know-how and the quality of banking supervision worldwide. So they have been issuing their best practice rules for the banks to operate. Um, the that is promote that the objective, or rather their rules, are to promote common understanding between the national supervisors by sharing the national issues and techniques, so that that can be applied as a best practices by other countries, and so to improve the stability of the financial markets in the world. So Basel Committee best practice standards can be used by individual regulatory authorities in making local regulations. So Basel Committee is again not a rule. They are suggesting, or they are providing rules for the central banks or the regulators to use in your markets. Because if you break these rules inside the market by the players, the financial institutes, the punishment will not come from Basel. Punishment will come from your regulator, because your regulator is the one who has introduced these rules using the Basel Committee's recommendations. So basically, it is international standards on capital adequacy and effective banking supervision, how you need to do the banking supervision, what are the things that you need to look at, how do you look at the assets, how do you look at the risk-based assets. So if you work in financial institute, you are always exposed to this because we are a follower of Basel regulations in Sri Lanka. Central bank is serious about it. And Basel is supported by 5 working groups: policy development, supervision and implementation, consultative groups, and also macroprudential supervision and accounting experts. So these are 5 committees kind of things, and they are recommending the common rules which has to be used by the banks or the financial institutes for the better control, or rather betterment of the financial industry, and it will keep the sanity of the financial industry in the world. And again, to highlight, Basel Accords are recommendations. This is what you need to remember: recommendations on banking laws and regulations. They are not rules by Basel for your financial institutes. It's a recommendation, so your central banks will, or the regulators will adopt those rules and make rules out of this. Resilience on economic stress, capital adequacy, liquidity. These are the main things that the Basel regulations have been looking at: how liquid you are, and what is your capital adequacy, risk-based assets, and how you make sure that the capital is adequate in terms of any unseen or unknown attack in the sense like unknown risk the market is going into. So at that time, how well the resilience of your organizations are. Main things are these two. If anyone who has been in the banking sector at the time this Basel Accord was implemented in Sri Lanka, like 2000, maybe about 4, 5, 7 or somewhere like that, you know that how this changes how we are looking at capital adequacy and liquidity. And now it's BAU, business as usual, so you might not see much of a difference because it's the normal thing that we are doing now. Other measures other than that, the key focus areas, the improving risk management, governance, transparency, these are like everywhere. So if you are asked about what is Basel's main, the key focus areas, it's about capital adequacy and liquidity. These are the tricks for you in there. All right, so we discussed a lot, and I want you to do a little study because otherwise it'll be boring. So you need to look at Financial Stability Board, FSB, and I'm putting you into the groups for 10 minutes, but I need to do it quickly because we need to finish some more areas today. So I want you to find out what the purpose is, how it helps international financial markets, and how are the policies implemented in the countries on FSB. Clear? Take a screenshot because when we put you into the groups, you might not see this. And I want you to discuss and come back with the key points on each of these. Okay. Okay. So we have 11 people. I will just put you into 3 groups so that you can all members get chance of. Okay, right, I'm opening the rooms. Please do discuss and come back in 10 minutes. Accept the invitation. People, please join the groups.
Sir, you are mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, my bad. Okay, so I was just telling that we had 3 groups and we had 3 members who had not joined the groups. So let's see what have you learned on FSB? The purpose. What's the purpose? Why FSB? You can hear me now, right? Can you?
To promote international financial stability.
Right. Okay. So that's this is one of the international organizations. So it's promote international stability. Any other answers? Any other descriptive answers by any chance?
To develop strong regulatory and supervisory and other financial sector policies.
Yeah. Okay, Shinanta. Yeah, that's good. Other groups? Any more? No. So, how does it help international financial markets? What does it do? And also, how are the policies implemented in countries? What is your read? What do they do? How does it help international financial markets? If you ask a question, how do you answer that? I mean, it can be right or wrong. There's nothing right or wrong. Just go ahead. Come on.
They implemented the financial ratios such as capital adequacy ratios, SRR, statutory reserve ratios.
Right. Suresh? Any others? How do they implement these policies in countries? Can they directly go and implement these in the countries? How does it happen?
Sri Lanka, through the Basel three Basel's policies committee requirements, every country has to sign the Basel agreements. They need implemented all over the world. It should be adopted by the all over the bank who entered with the Basel committee requirements.
The regulators, basically. Right?
Yes.
Central banks. Okay. Other groups? Nothing. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So FSB is basically the monitors and makes recommendations about the global financial systems. What does it do? Monitor, one function, and make recommendations. Because they are to make recommendations. If regulators wants to follow, they can follow it. Their job is only to make the recommendations for betterment of the financial sector. And they coordinate the national financial authorities and international standard setting bodies. Like Suresh earlier said that yes, they're working with all international standard setting bodies like Basel committees and all that things, and then the national financial authorities, so that they make a proper set of matching rules all across the road, all across the world, to develop and promote the implementation of effective regulatory supervision and the financial sector policies. So it helps to develop and promote the implementation of effective regulatory supervision. So financial sector policies. So Financial Stability Board is mainly looking at the policy making of the countries, and it to be it's monitoring and recommending how policies has to be designed by the individual countries for international harmony of financial sector. Um, um, and this there's video link. I'm not going to run through that now, but you can watch that when I share uh, the slides. The mandate of FSB is to assess the vulnerabilities affecting the financial system and identify and oversee actions needed to address them. So why it's important is it assesses the vulnerabilities which are coming in new, like what we discussed earlier, the virtual currencies, and also some of the threats which are coming into the system because of having companies incorporating their head offices in uh, the tax havens. So how it impacts the financial sector and minimizing the room for any malpractices, and promote because See now, it's like police and thieves, right? So whoever wants to do a malpractice will always be creative, and if the police is not creative to catch them, you can't catch them, and there will be a lot of crimes around. Likewise, FSB and all other, I mean, it's not only FSB, it's all other institutes are also looking at what are the new tools that the people who are using for malpractices, and to combat them, they need to come up with new regulations, new ways of measurements, new ways of policies. How do you deal with them? And since that financial sector is very much international, and it can you don't have to physical intervention of having deals around the world, it's being complicated now, so that they need to come up with, they need to be more smarter than the thieves, otherwise you can't catch them. So second one is promote coordination and information exchange, which is again important. Looking at the vulnerabilities is one thing. What can make the financial sector vulnerable? Second one is you need to share the information, because now it's the nature is international. How well authorities are comfortable in sharing information. It's not 100% comfortable yet. So no country at the moment, it's very difficult to get countries to share information, even though they talk about more transparency. And monitor and advise on market developments and their implementation implications for regulatory policies. So it's one of the main functions: monitor and look at market development, advise on advise and monitor best practices, meet the regulatory standards, undertake joint strategic reviews of the policy development work of international standard setting bodies, because this FSB work as an intermediary in getting everyone together to make sure that these policies which are designed with ideas that are having by the international bodies, and making them link up with the institutes, national institutes who will be implementing them, and set guidelines for and support the establishment of supervisory colleagues, and manage contingency planning for cross-border crisis management, particularly respect of systematic important firms. So and collaborate with IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to conduct early warning exercises. So this is overall looking at different layers of different levels of international harmony on financial stability, and they will monitor, as you saw in the first one, monitor and recommend is their main functions on the financial stability. Important institute, International Organization for Securities and Commission. So we discussed it earlier as well. So this is again a policy maker who has introduced 38 principles under 10 categories. And this is specifically on securities, Organization of Securities Commissions. So this is about how the statutory regulated bodies, the primary responsible for securities regulations. So they have given 10 categories and 38 principles. And all these are in your textbook, as well as if you search on the net. And this is important for you to know. I told you earlier also. So the main purpose of protection of investors, because we are talking about specifically on securities. This is not on banking, but yeah, regulations can be used, but generally about securities, including all investments. Ensure that the markets are fair, efficient, and transparent. So how markets are being fair, efficient, transparent? You need to know about it. And then why these 38 principles are to make it fair, efficient, and transparent. Because then only actual market conditions will come out, and there's no hidden information, so that market will efficiently operate and trust will be there in the market, because that's very important for securities markets. And reduce the reduction of systemic risk, so that there's no systemic risk when you operate under these principles. Again, this is international organization which gives you principles. It's up to you to follow. So these are the 10 categories relating to regulators. It gives the, I think it's from 1 to 8 on the regulators, self-regulations, enforcement of securities and regulations, corporation regulations, so on and so forth. It gives 10 categories and 38 principles are given in it, so that each of these categories can effectively operate if you are following these categories. This IOSCO recommendations or the principles are being highly respected in all the financial markets because they are best practices that you have to go in. And if regulator wants to do that, regulators are given a set of rules. And if the issuers need to have it, and corporation like self-regulated bodies, what you need to follow, and as a efficient self-regulating institute, what are the things that you can do as principles, they are given it. So your job in this is, please make sure that you go through this. I've attached it here, but you can find it in the net. I don't have it separately, and your textbook also has it as far as I can remember. Please read in relation to these categories. This is examination tip. You need to read in relation to this each of these categories. I'm not asking you to memorize 38. I'm just asking to read it in relation to categories so that you will know if it asks this particular regulation number 38 or number 8 or something like that is in relation to the best practice of regulations to the regulator, or is it something to related to the secondary market. Then if you have read it through this 38 in relation to these categories, you can easily pick it up. Oh no, that regulation is relating to the regulators, not about the secondary market. These are very simple things. No technicalities involved in it because it's very high level defined. So please read through that and make sure that you take a print of this 38. If you don't have in the textbook, let me see. I think you have. Oh no, it's not there. So make sure that you read it through because even if it has not given in the textbook, examiner is really thorough with this and is expecting you to be the same. Those three we were discussing about are international regulatory bodies who are working on providing regulations or providing guidelines. And the other set we were talking about, we discussed about three sets. One is international organizations. Second is European regulatory bodies. And third is about US. So this is the second one, European regulatory bodies. We're going to discuss about European system of financial supervision, European supervisory authorities, and European systemic risk boards. So European system of financial supervision is comprising of these two, macroprudential supervision and microprudential supervision. So we earlier discussed about prudentiality, so what it covers. If you can't remember, please make sure you go from the beginning. So European system of financial supervision is it's use financial supervisory framework in response to financial crisis. Why they wanted to come up with the prudential supervision is about the stability or the agility of the financial system. Financial crisis has made them to realize that there is a requirement, so that they have formed up this. It replaces the three existing committees. So there were three separate committees supervision within within this, so that it establishes a single authority, or other three come into one umbrella with new three authorities. Oops. And these European supervisory authorities, the European Banking Authority, European Securities and Market Authority, and European Insurance and Occupational Pension Authority. This side. So the aim is to provide single EU rulebook. Oh, why haven't I highlighted this? This is very important. The aim is to provide single EU rulebook. So if a question is asked about like what is the aim of European Supervisory Authority, you just say that it's providing single EU rulebook. That's what they are looking for. Ensure consistent and appropriate financial supervision through the EU. So that through the EU, throughout the EU, that is everywhere in the EU. Improve coordination between the national supervisory authorities and raise standards of national supervision across EU. So that's their jurisdiction, or that's where they are going to operate, and that's what they're going to do. European Systemic Risk Board, the under the European Central Bank or ECB, macroprudential oversight of the financial system within the EU. This one. And it provides analytics and statistical, administrative, and logistical support to ESBR, and technical advice is also drawn from National Central Bank and supervisors. So basically normal functions of that international supervisory bodies. So US Securities and Exchange Commission, so these are the ones that were dealing with the European regulatory bodies. And then we are going into the US third category, US Securities and Exchange Commission. So the objective is protect investors as always in all other exchanges, maintain fair, ordinary, and effective markets, and facilitate capital information. So this is common to any other as well. So enforce federal securities laws, purpose securities rules, and so proper securities rules, and to regulate the securities industry, which is again normal. And primary overseer and regulator of the US securities market. This is important because he is the one who's, or this is the one who's overseeing the US securities market, and it coordinates with other institutes, exchanges, private organizations, and all these things. And the chairman of SEC represents the agency as the member of Financial Stability Oversight Council. So he is a powerful man when it comes to Securities and Exchange Commission, the US securities monitor, the regulator. And I'm introducing fourth category as well. So that's the professional bodies. Now we discuss about the international institutes, the regulatory bodies, European, US, and now we're talking about the professional bodies, which are not basically regulators, but these are for the well-being of the market, the overall well-being of the market and the participants is ensured by professional bodies. That's why most of the time, some of the positions of the financial institutes require professional qualification and the membership of professional bodies. Why? Because professional bodies have their own the code of conduct and train them according to certain level of ethics. If you take CIMA, ACCA, or any other chartered accounting bodies, so these are training you for professionals and with set of rules and regulations to be the member, and people take pride of being members of them. And similarly, these professional bodies will ensure that the people who are members of that are behaving according to the code of conduct that are given by these. And They uphold the standards of conduct of their members. So that doesn't mean that all members are following that. So some of the people who have done corruption inside the countries are also being members of these professional bodies. So it doesn't stop them doing it, but general understanding is they're minimizing the room for any malpractices, because that members of professional bodies are expected to uphold the level of professional conduct in their respective functions in relation to professional conduct. So they think that uphold the standard conduct of their members, and they deliver training and support, continuous training, support, and new industry movements will be first known to them, and they will communicate them, and they will give certain guidelines on how to operate and have discussion forums, so that these all are helping the professionals who are members of the professional bodies and being trusted to run certain seats or the office. They provide forum for industry development because they and also they provide public face for agreed industry positions to be publicized with the public information or the part of specific lobbying efforts. So if there's any new concern coming up, that institutes will come up and say that, hey, this is coming up, so that we need to do something about it. And so those professional bodies will represent that issue and provide some recommendations or some ways of controlling or damage controlling certain things like that. And last, with the regulators to discuss the approach in the areas of concern, so like what we discussed earlier, and provide the members the guidelines, how regulatory requirements might be satisfied. So if a regulator might come up with a principle-based approach, and then the professional bodies, let's say there's some accounting standard that is coming up as a self-regulation, so you need to report this, and then the professional bodies will come up and say that, okay, fine, to satisfy that, we suggest this is the best way of doing that. So people don't have to reinvent the wheel always, and there will be something which is being shared by professional bodies, will be respected by the regulators as well as the members, and that can be used as a tool uh, in the future to address that particular issue or the solution. And implementing regulatory objectives and approach to supervision. So we are under this, we are going to discuss about understand how regulators implement their regulatory objectives, what method that they're going to use, and understand different regulatory approaches, which is generally known to you. I know that risk-based approach, rule-based approach, thematic audits, and relationship-based and principle-based approach that they're using. These are different approaches that the regulators will take to do the proper supervision and objectively supervise the market. Implementing regulatory objectives and approach to supervision. So that's how regulators typically implement. So when it comes to institutes, how they start doing it mainly is the regulators does not have unlimited resources, unlimited ways of looking at it. So what they do is they first set up certain standards. This is the group that we are regulating. You can't regulate the financial industry. What you do is, okay, these are the players of the financial industry. This category of financial industry players, we will have monitoring on them at X level, and this, the majority, will have Y level of control, and certainly they implement it. And then they give the minimum entry standard, you to be governed by us, and for us to make sure that you're being supervised by us. These are the minimum standards. So it has to be a licensed commercial bank. To become a licensed commercial bank, what are the requirements, capital requirements, and the professionals who are involved in it, and so on and so forth, that they will give certain set of standards. And then they will agree certain rules that these are the ones that you will have to provide us, and these are the minimum standard that you need to operate on. and this is how you need to report to us. Are you agreeing? If they are agreeing, yes, you can be a member of this. Otherwise, we are not allowing you to do this business because there's minimum standard of applying into as an entry barrier. But two things, entry barriers are not actually barriers to enter into this one. What they say is to make sure that you're operating at a certain level, we need a minimum standard that you need to come up with. So if you can't come up with a minimum standard, we can't take you into the industry. So for example, you can't go and open up a bank just because you know how to run a bank. You need to have certain capital requirement, you need to have certain uh, reporting requirements, and also other professionals who are in certain places in important seats in the seats in the company, and also, or even if you have all those things, you have to apply for the membership, so that then only they will give you the permission to operate or the license to operate. So that's how they control the entry, minimum entry standards. And other method is, now they get them into the system, have a minimum entry requirements, and once you're in the system, there's a risk-based approach that they can take. There are different approaches that they can take. Risk-based approach they can take, also anti-money laundering and combating of financial terrorism, so that they have risk on those areas, so that they will use that as a theme, or maybe as regulations, regulators and institutes to identify, assess, and understand and what are the measures that they are going to combat with this. And risk sensitive approach applications, so that they know what sort of things are affecting, what can make or what can take the company to a risk or financial market to a risk. But these all are where it can have a risk and how to mitigate the risk. It doesn't ensure that it's a zero failure. So it's not about zero failure, it's about regulate. So the main intention of regulator is to regulate so that the financial stability is in the system, so the system will not collapse. It doesn't mean there's no room for someone to do something. Always there will be. And impact of risks posed by individual firms is assessed. That will be done on the risk-based approach, and I'm not going to details on this one. But make sure that market failure will not happen because of individual firms malpractice or not following the rules. So that's the main objective of risk-based approach. So if there's some more risky areas, then which can have a systemic impact, you will put more concentrated effort on that one. And less risk, the effort will be less. You allow firms to manage it. So like that, the regulators will manage the system with their limited resources. So basically, it looks at how risky these events or type of things that can happen, and institutes can bring into the financial stability of the market. So basically, that's a risk that regulators are looking at. As an institute, yes, you will have to look at all these risks, but as a regulator, they will look at risk-based approach, whether that can impact the financial system of the country or the system at large. So risk to objective, basically they look at how a firm's behavior on this, the firm's strategy, the firm's business risk, the financial soundness of the firm, and who are the firm's customers, and the product and services it offers, internal systems and controls, whether they are in place so that it's adequate, and how the compliance culture is working. So that's to make sure that the system is not being put into risk by individual firm. So if that are in place, regulator will be somewhat okay. The other approach is rule-based approach the regulators are taking. So rule-based approach is giving the detailed rules. We discussed this earlier many a times. So then it provides a set of rules that firms have to follow. It's all defined. Someone can tell that it's a tick box exercise, but tick box, when you tick the boxes, you reduce the risk. There can be room for some risk, but you reduce the risk so that system will not get impacted when you tick the box. If you don't tick the box, it's very easy to catch under this process. But the other way around is that always regulator will have to come up with the rules every time when things change. But that's all right in some instances, rather than just allowing the the market to uh, risk themselves. So regulators always take actions to give the rules as much as possible to prevent major risks that will impact the market. Um, seek improved supervisory approach and also increase the focus on outcome testing of this rule-based approach. It's much easier when it comes to rule-based approach because you don't have to go and research for it. It's a tick boxes whether that is box is ticking. And the other approach the regulators will take is thematic supervision. Then you might have subject to like people who are not working on regulatory function in your organization. You might have heard of these ones, but might not know. But thematic supervision is the generally what is followed by the central bank at the moment. That is, you find out specific theme and audit through that particular process so that you will find out all the issues which are working within that process. Specific issues, focus area, and focus its resources because I told you earlier also because regulator doesn't have unlimited resources, they have limited resources. If they try to do everything, if they come to your organization, just imagine if they come to your organization and try to audit everything what is happening, what will happen? They will just go around and they will come up with nothing, or they will just pick up on very petty things, whereas they will forget about the big picture of it. But thematic supervision give a comparison also, like this team is going, you have 6 teams, they are going to 6 different organizations and doing one theme so that they can cross refer what are the best practices of this company and what are the malpractices of this company, or what are the practices which are not up to standard. So it's being encouraged at the moment because it will give you better results. So how you find theme is using the risk-based approach. They will use the risk-based approach to find the theme, but they will do thematic review so that specific issues on risky areas can be picked up easily. And the tools used by the regulator, why I have put it in red, is these are generally being subject to questions in your exam. So they use diagnostic tools, and also they will be asking funny questions like how many type of tools are used by regulators in monitoring the subjects of the regulator. So you'll have to say 4: diagnostic tools, monitoring tools, preventive tools, and remedial tools. So these are the 4 tools that regulator is using as per the textbook. You can agree, you cannot agree, and there will be more. But please tell it is 4. And by any chance, if you ask about any of these questions, just answer out of what they have given. Because examiners can be funny sometimes. So relationship-based supervision is close and continued supervision. Why is relationship-based supervision? You might wonder why relationship-based supervision is there. Because some of the firms are riskier to the market. Why I'm telling you that is, like if that firm lose the stability, that will pose a market instability. Like it can have a market-wide impact. Having said that, we have 21 commercial banks, so that each of these are actually subject to relationship-based supervision. If you work in compliance functions, you know that you have directly person who's in from bank supervision a link with you, and they are constantly engaging with you and knowing about what's happening here and how it is happening, and you will have good relationship with that people also. Like if you go wrong, you go and inform them. They don't make much of a fuss about it because they know that they are having relationship with you and they are managing you so that it will not impact the system. Making a mistake, making error, making a wrong reporting does not make the system to collapse. But if you go and tell them, we made a mistake, we made this error, we had this flow in our system, they are confident. Okay, you do your part in monitoring by yourself, so that the relationship is there maintained by the regulators, because it's close and it's continuous supervision. It's not that you come and do a audit and find something. It's day-to-day business you are involving with them. So when it comes to the relationship-based supervision, Sri Lanka can do that because we have limited number of commercial banks, but they're not doing it with all the finance companies. They might have one relationship manager for many, or maybe something like that, but I know for sure that they are following this concept very well. So they know what's happening in the bank or what's happening in commercial banks, because each of these commercial banks will have systemic impact if something goes wrong. Systemic impact is not about the size of the bank. It's about impact to the market, the trust about the financial market. So they don't want again a promoter coming in. So that's why they have started relationship-based supervision. So, but sometimes some market who's having huge amount of firms might not be able to do that, but they will then pick what are the key organizations, key financial institute that they need to focus on and keep constant dialogue with them. So they assign a particular member. You might not know if you work in commercial, in a commercial bank compliance function or somewhere related to whom you are always dealing with every day from bank supervision is the one who's assigned to you for the relationship-based supervision. And periodic visits, they will visit not in as audits, but they will have meetings. They will discuss with you, and ongoing desk-based monitoring of the firm's financial and information returns. So they will look at what you're sending out, and deep understanding of the firm and the strategy is with those people who are having the relationship managers as relationship managers. They know what your direction is. They know how you're behaving in certain instances. And if they see a risk, they will address it there and then and there, rather than waiting for anyone to pick it up later on. So that's a relationship-based situation. And principle-based approach is that we discussed it many times, and supervision is based on how the principles are implemented and outcomes are achieved. So this is a wish of the regulators. We give you the principle, you follow it, and you tell like you got the successful outcome. That's ideal world, but it's not always happening. So that regulators will have to have a combination of all these methods in regulating the market. Combination of all these methods that we discussed earlier. So risk-based, the risk-based approach, rule-based approach, and thematic supervision, and also relationship-based approach. So all these things are being used because principle-based approach is not the only thing that we can use for. Okay. Yes. Finish this. So, let's stop it from here for today. And So please use your textbook, and I'll ask these slides also to be uploaded. I think last time slides I didn't send. So let's try to finish this chapter next week at the first part of the lesson, and then we'll start the next chapter. Uh, so that chapter 4, because chapter 2 and 3 you have done it with Shane. We'll increase the speed of going through this if I see that you're on the mood and rolling the ball. So let's see how it goes. And if once we finish this part of the lesson, we discuss further questions and move on to the next lesson in the next class. So we may take about 30-40 minutes to finish this next week, and then we will do another set of questions for about another 30 minutes, and then after first half, second half, we'll use it for the next lesson. So please do go through this. Why I'm going slow on this one is that I want everyone to be in one page. I know some of you are ahead of uh, the others, but I want to take it as a class and teach the mid the middle level. So I'm requesting everyone to study, because you can't do it without studying. The more you learn, there will be more complicated things coming up. So first things, please put it in proper as a proper foundation. Otherwise, when it comes to MCQ questions, as you see, it's very difficult. If you ask to write answers, yes, you might do it better. But when it comes to MCQ questions, they are not stupid. They will ask questions which are, if you don't know the basic, if you cannot reach the actual basic point, you can go wrong. And I've shown you in your practice questions here. So that will happen. Even if you do over and over again, also you go wrong. So that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm telling you that you're not studying it properly. So please do take your text, take your internet, take YouTube. If what I'm telling is not that clear to you, you have all the tools. It just simply type on in net, YouTube, find it. Believe me, there are better videos than what I'm explaining you. So please use that. I'm not I'm just telling this because it's very important for all of us to do this. Okay. Okay, Lashani. So that's okay. So let's meet up next week, and until such time, please study. That's all what I can tell you now. And when it comes to answering questions, I want answers to come fast, because I'm not planning for like long for that. But unfortunately, we'll have to take long time because I'm seeing people are taking so long to answer questions, and some people are not even answering. That's not right, because as a class, we need to see where we are and need to progress learn from the mistakes and go ahead. Let's do that. And when you're doing that, now since that we have like come to the latter part of this lesson, the chapter, even though it's larger content, you will have 20% of the questions from this chapter in your question paper for sure, and that's a requirement by the examiner. They will include that. That is about 15 to 20 questions. If you are used to have a physical A3 paper, and make sure that you can have kind of diagrammatic view of what you have studied, please do that. Otherwise you will have questions in unconnected places. So take it as a story, make it one visual, and then that will be easier for you to understand things, where it is fitting and what are these things. So like that, I'm just trying to put you that structure into your mind. That's why I told you like these are the methods of regulations, and these are how it is being done. So like if it is regulations, and if you can have under that what are the type of regulators, what are the types that regulators are trying to implement it through, rule-based approach, principle-based approach, and what are the other approaches, so that how it works. That will be beneficial for you because pictures, the graphical view will keep better memory than trying to read the text. Telling you through the experience. Oh, sorry about it. I mistakenly pressed the wrong button. So, so that's about it. Please make sure that you have some method of study to do the basics, and we'll meet up next class. All right, bye bye, and see you next
Thank
week.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Bye
Thank you, sir. Lecture notes.
bye. All right,
Evan does.
Hari. Okay.